Good and gracious Lord, we thank you for this beautiful day and thank you for the gathering of fellowship this morning where we hear about different things in our community, in our world, and in our spiritual life. We touch all those bases, Lord, through your help and guidance. Be with us today as we ponder what we hear and enjoy and think through the messages that we'll hear from the various people who will talk about experiences that they have and commentaries on that. It's a mystical discussion for me anyway. Help us to be open-minded and learn from today's discussions. Ask that you be with all those families in our church and in our group who have lost members of their family recently. Comfort them with your touching grace. Just bless their lives and guide them in the grieving period and reflecting on the good memories that they have. Be with us as we travel through this week. Amen. David, you're the first one up today.
Super.
So without further ado, no long 10-minute introductions for you, sorry. As you all know, I think everybody here knows Dave, so it's all yours, Dave.
Thank you. I have told a few of you that I'm very hesitant to have this spiritual sharing because in my wildest dreams, I thought I'm going to have to talk for an hour. Nobody will want to get up and share. And the Lord opened my mind and reminded me that we have people here who have shared freely. So anyway, I have a slide that when I first saw it, I thought, that reminds me of life, what we're going through in life. And here's the slide. We start out having kids and taking care of kids and carrying them around. And then it turns us on our head and the grandkids are carrying her, not her two boys. Her two boys, that's the kids of her two boys. If you look at the years, it can't be her two boys.
You look really good for 50.
Yeah. But anyway, I thought you'd like to see that. But I'm going to share almost my single, although I have a second if there's time that I will share. But my sister passed this past year, and thank you for all the condolences. But it was shortly after she passed that I got up early in the morning, and there's nothing else to do when it's still dark outside but check the video camera. Did any deer or other varmints go across our porch? But instead what I saw was a round spherical orb of light circulating around very slowly. It was a calming speed and a purposefully, because it was windy out. So it wasn't something that was blowing across my screen, and it would go in different patterns and circle around. And I was fortunate enough to be able to take a picture of that during that video. And here it is.
Right arrow.
Can you turn the lights down, Ann? It's a little difficult to see, but this is the spherical orb, and it was just slowly, it was actually, when I remember it, it was brighter, a little bit brighter. So I don't think the camera captured its full intensity, but it just slowly, and this continued. Now this shows you, this is a spider web.
Oh.
So it's not an aberrant freak of nature. It was something that was calming to me. I said, thank you, Carla. I appreciate you coming by to calm me down. Yes, I miss you, but I know you're in a very good place. So people have asked to see it, and somehow I figured out how you take a screensaver on a cell phone. It's just not very easy to do. So anyway, I'm not going to take a long time because the shorter we have, the more we can hear from others. And the two people that I knew were willing to share, I asked if they would come and share their experiences with us. And we have the microphone up. They can come up here and talk. But after that, if there are people that want to say something from their seats or whatever, we can do that. But let's get on to our first speaker, Pastor Eric. Yep.
Yes, I will.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for having me again. Dave asked last week if I'd be willing to come and share a little something about some near-death experiences that I have had. And I guess the way I look at my life in its totality is I'm a walking miracle. In 1984, I was born 2 months premature. My parents were 17. My mom was 16. And never met them, but they had the foresight to put me up for adoption. But as you can imagine, medical technology back then was not as great as it is now. So I have cerebral palsy, mild case. Most people don't notice. They probably think I have a bad back or bad knees, all of which is true, but it's actually cerebral palsy. And when I was 14, I had a physical therapist because I had the aspirations to become a professional wrestler. Yeah, that's another story. But he said, Eric, you got the body. I did at the time. But let's be honest, you have the flexibility of a 92-year-old. Professional wrestling's not in your future. Okay, thanks. Anyways, my course of life has been I don't want to say this, filled with God moments. Because the way I look at some of the highlights of my life, and from when I was born to what I've gone through to what I've lived through to this very moment, you know, you can actually see if your eyes are open, evidence of God everywhere, miracles everywhere. And like I said, I consider myself to be one. And when I was 16, almost 17, actually, yeah, I was closer to 17. I was in a car accident, a horrific car accident, to the point where my nose was closer to the side of my eye than the middle of my face. And I got out of the car. I made sure my friend wasn't okay. And then I went down. Ambulance came. My mom came. She should have just stayed home. That was not helpful. That was bad. But I bled and bled and bled. And the doctors could not stop the bleeding. I was bleeding from my nose for about 9 hours. And experienced lots of things in that time frame. But what I remember is God's presence surrounding me. It wasn't something like a spherical orb like Dave showed. I wish it was that clear and obvious, right? But there was this sense that I'm going to be okay. And it wasn't a sense that I could conjure up on my own, because I'm in a severe car accident. My face is misaligned more than usual. And I just crashed a car. My friend was inside. Like, everything that goes through your mind at that moment is anything but calm, is anything but peaceful. And what you realize is when you walk around or when you go through life, you have to realize miracles are happening everywhere. How do you believe in God in a day like this? When our country or the world looks like this? I believe in God because there's no other explanation for the beauty and majesty of it all. Dr. William H. Bond, he was the doctor at the ER that day. And he said, Eric, well, we have two options for you. I go, well, I'm still bleeding, so I'm curious as to what's happening. Okay. They shoved hygiene products up my nose, medication up my nose, nothing stopped it. And he said, Eric, we can either crack it back into place and you can have surgery if it doesn't work, or we can just go straight to surgery. I said, well, either way ends in surgery. Crack it back in place first. And so he gets up, and I'm laying on the hospital bed. He straddles me, which I'm pretty sure goes against every code of ethics now. But he straddles me. And then he goes, oh God. And I'm like,
Never helps.
that helps me. That feels good. Is it on the other side now? No. He's like, Eric, you didn't flinch. You didn't move. That's not normal. I go, thanks, I think. I'm also bleeding for 9 hours. Like, I'm not sure if it's numbness or God being with me, but thank you. He cracked it back in place well enough that I was fine for a few years. Yeah, eventually had rhinoplasty, but whatever. But what I've learned in those moments in that time, because I thought if the car accident didn't kill me, my mother would.
Yeah.
Peace. Just overwhelming peace. And that doesn't mean the hardships and the grief doesn't go away. That's still present. That's still there. But the sense of peace that I'm not walking this journey alone, that I have a sense of purpose, that there's a reason I'm still here. There's still a reason why I am alive. By all accounts, there have been many injuries in my life and many things that should have changed drastically the way I live and my course of life. And yet God, the strongest that I can think of, 2 words in the Bible are but God. I was doing this, but God. I was going through this, but God. And so that's kind of how I try to live my life. Things aren't easy. They will never be easy. Whether personally, the world, we all know things are not easy right now. But God. So all I would say is stay with your eyes open to the miracles of God and see and look for the evidences that are clearly out there. And I think part of the reasons we always struggle to see them is because we're too busy, we're too distracted, we have too many things on our agenda. We have a running task list of what needs to be done, whether it's at home or at work or anywhere in between. There's always stuff that needs to be done. But when we take time to actually slow down, it's there, and it's then that you will experience that peace, that presence that overwhelms you. And I'm just grateful. Cliche, I'm grateful to be alive because it's a miracle that I am. And I attribute it all to the glory of God because there is a purpose. And there are days I wonder what that purpose is. Why am I here? What is going on? But then, sure enough, as soon as you ask the question, he answers. So I could go on to other stories as to how I have experienced God in very trying ways. I'll share another one. Why not? Wasn't going to, because it's a little far out there. I was hanging with my best friend at the time. I was probably 14, 13, 14. And he had some friends over. And I had never met them before. And they were kind of weird. Jesus loves them. But they were weird. And then they started like getting candles out. And they said, let's do a seance. And I'm like, what? I kind of got that gross feeling. Eric, lay down. Not wanting to be not cool, I laid down. And they said words and did things, and it was weird. And then I had a very, very graphic vision. And I was actually at the Oklahoma City bombing. I think that was in 95, 94, 95, something like that. I would have been 11. So that's a different. But I was going through all these rooms and I saw a body without a head. And that's what I remember. And then more, I wake up or whatever, get up, and they're like, that was crazy. I was like, yeah, what did you just do to me? That was demonic. And they're like, well, that's never happened before because I'm supposed to do this and then like touch you on your head or on your shoulder, but I didn't do that. And I explained what I saw and what I experienced. And it was horrifying. Good came out of it. Because I said that was so disturbing on so many different levels that we had a long conversation. They ended up coming to church. Praise God for that. But it was crazy. And so when people say they don't believe in spiritual warfare, they don't believe in demons. If you take the demons and exorcisms out of the Bible, you took away half of Jesus' miracles. There are people out there who are hurting in so many different ways that need all sorts of love. And I think one of the greatest things we can do is to call it like we see it. Don't sugarcoat it. Don't beat around the bush. If something feels off, say it's off. And then give it to the Lord. And say, like, listen, I don't know what to make of this experience because it was horrible. I never want to. But then if you bring it back to the Bible, this is probably why Jesus said, stay away from these people. Stay away from mediums and psychics and all that stuff. They don't fill you like God fills you. And just having that kind of awareness in life, there is always something beneath the surface that people are wrestling with, that people are struggling with. And it's our job, it's our responsibility to love them, to care for them, to walk with them, and to speak truth. Speak the truth. And Christ loves them. And sometimes in very weird ways, God will work in miraculous ways, like he did for me. So I'll answer any questions I can. I don't really have, like I said, that was not planned to share, but feel free to. I'm an open book, so if you have a question, I'll answer it. Hopefully. Oh, you're all riveted or asleep? Dave.
Oh.
Or you're counting, you don't have a question. Okay.
Thank you. I think that was very good. Let's go on to Nick and keep moving through this spiritual experiences.
Yeah. I think that's you, Nick.
That's me.
Thank you, Eric.
One of the good things about going third is you get to build on the things that the two previous speakers said. In terms of David's pictorial of life, reminded me of the Oracle at Delphi. The Oracle asked this question to anyone who dared to try to answer it. The question was, what walks on 4 legs in the morning, walks on 2 legs in the afternoon, and walks on 3 legs in the evening? And the only problem was if you guessed wrong, he killed you. So people were hopefully careful. But anybody have an idea? Go ahead. Man, exactly. In the morning, we walk on all 4s, we crawl. When we're at middle age, we hopefully stand upright and walk on 2. And then in our later years, very often we may walk with a cane or a crutch, or use a wheelchair or some other device. The other thing I can say, building on Eric, is he says he shouldn't be here. I definitely shouldn't be here. When I was 6 years old, I got hit by a car going 80 miles an hour. Got thrown 30 feet up against a building, had my tongue cut off, was bleeding profusely. I can tell you when you cut your tongue, all kinds of blood come flowing out in mouthfuls. My mother heard the car screech its brakes. She says she knew it was me. She ran out of the apartment house. I was laying up against the wall. She stopped the guy who had hit me, made him take me to the emergency room where they sewed my tongue back on. But what they didn't do was check other things because they were so worried about me being able to talk, which they really shouldn't have worried about. That comes pretty naturally to me, with a tongue or without a tongue. But I remember that bright light in my face when they were sewing my tongue on. It was not fun. And it turned out I had a concussion for 4 weeks. Missed first grade for the first month at Our Lady of Miraculous Middle Church school. And made me realize really early how fragile we all are as human beings. One misstep, on a football field, or one misstep in front of a car like I did, you can say bye-bye. So that made me very cautious as I moved through life. And I want to tell you 2 experiences. One has to do with the near-death experience of my mother, and the second one has to do with a miracle that totally changed my life. My mother was in her mid-40s. She had 4 of us. I was the oldest of 4. It was myself, my sister Rosemary, and my brother Michael. And the youngest one was Jean Ann, that we called Jeannie. And in her mid-40s, she discovered she was pregnant. And they called it at the time a change-of-life baby. You may have heard that expression. But my mother, told us she didn't think she could get pregnant, so this was a big surprise to her. She and my father obviously weren't taking precautions. And so my sister came along. And my mother had a very hard time with the pregnancy. She was sick all the time. She couldn't work. She was pretty well bedridden for the 9 months till she had my sister. And then one morning, her water broke. My father took her to the hospital to deliver a baby. And during that time, they had a lot of problems. My mother got very high blood pressure. I think the baby was breech. They had to use forceps to get her out. And in fact, I don't know if you remember, but in the old days in hospitals, when a baby was first born, they'd take a picture. And when my father brought the picture home of my sister, she had all these bruises all over. And those were from the forceps. She was black and blue in the face. And I looked at it and said to my father, "That's the ugliest baby I ever saw." "She's not going to come home from the hospital that way, is she?" My father said, "No, she'll look better when she comes home." But she and my mother were in that hospital for a couple of weeks before she was able to come home. And during this very tough delivery, my mother from their standpoint, from the medical doctor standpoint, actually died. They lost her blood pressure. She had no pulse, and she was basically gone. And my mother remembers her soul or her spirit coming out of her body, rising up to the ceiling of the operating room, and her looking down and seeing them trying desperately to resuscitate her and calling for extra doctors to come running. Anyway, as I say, the doctors say that her heart was stopped completely for 6 minutes. And during that time, my mother remembers coming out of her body, going up to the ceiling of the operating room, seeing them working desperately to get her to breathe and get her heart going again. And she went through the ceiling, out through the roof, into space. And she remembers going into a tunnel. You know, scientists today talk about dark holes and wormholes and all those sorts of things. And my mother, years earlier, described her experience of going through this tunnel. And she said it was quite a scary ride. There's a lot of twists and turns in the tunnel and lasted longer than I think she would have liked. And anyway, she comes to this light, and the light is extremely bright. She said it was the brightest light she ever saw. But she could see an outline of Jesus through that light. And he was wearing a white cloak, sandals. And my mother realized that it was Jesus and that she was dead. And so she decides, people don't like this when I use the word, she decided to have an argument with God or a debate. People have said to me, say it was a plea, say it was a supplication. Don't call it a debate, but if you knew my mother, it was a debate. And she says to God, I can't die. I got these 4 kids. They're all little. They need their mother. And she says, and their father is a nincompoop. He'll never be able to take care of them. And, you know, she says he's a cop and he has crazy hours and he's never home. So I can't die. I got to be here for these kids. And he listened to her. And then she said, he smiled and said one word. And she said, the word gives both life and death. But we can never get her to tell us the word. She said if she remembered the word, she would die. And probably it was in Aramaic or Hebrew anyway. So she wouldn't have known what the heck he was saying. But she said he said one word. And you know, in some versions of the Bible, it says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, and of God, and so on. So the word business is a pretty important aspect of our religion. And having the breath of life, it's been talked about. So anyway, he sends her back. She goes back through the tunnel. She goes back through space. She goes back into the hospital. She goes back into the operating room. And boom, she's alive. And they got her heart to beat again. And they got her pressure up. And she survived. And she was a remarkable woman. She really did raise the 4 of us and did a very excellent job. She was the soft one. My father was the hard one. Being a cop, it was easy for him to be the tough one. But she had a very close relationship with God. It's interesting because she was a Mormon. And her father was an elder in the Mormon church. She lived in Colorado. My father met her during World War II. He was in the Army Air Corps, wasn't the Air Force then. It was the Army Air Corps, and he met her at a USO dance. But she came from Colorado, married my father, and lived in New York. And she had a weird first name. Her name was Verla, V-E-R-L-A. Well, Mormons have weird names, in case you don't know. And she was very religious and very intuitive. And later in life, she became a graphologist, and she worked for various police departments in the FBI, analyzing handwriting. And she was able to help them solve a couple of murder cases by the way she was able to describe who the writer of the note was or what the note was really saying. So she always had this kind of sixth sense or intuitiveness. She always knew when one of us was sick, even when we married and moved away and stuff. So she was a very interesting lady. She ended up dying of, well, first she got breast cancer and then she got brain cancer. And it was hard to watch people who had cancer in those days, particularly of the brain, because they didn't have the kind of drugs that they have today. And so when people had a glioblastoma, what often would happen was they'd start to lose their eyesight, or their hearing, or their ability to speak. And in some cases, they actually had to drill holes in the skull to relieve the pressure of the growing tumor. So it was pretty horrendous in those days to go through something like that. And I remember when she was close to dying, you know, we were all there, and I remember saying to her, you know, Ma, you got to let go. You got to go. This isn't good for you or for us. You're suffering so much. And she couldn't speak, but I heard her say to me, I'll go when I'm good and ready. She's kind of reminding me she was the mother and I was the child. And believe it or not, we were there for days expecting her to die, and the doctors told us to hang around. And then finally one night the doctor said, she's not going to die tonight. Go ahead and go home. And we went home, and then they called us at 5 o'clock and said she had died. But I really believe she just didn't want us to see her die. I really believe she chose the time when she felt it was right. So even though she said to me, I'll go in my good and ready, she meant it, and she did it. So that's the near-death experience my mother had. The other miracle that I want to talk about, and I'll try to do it as briefly as possible, but it was very impactful on my life. I had a cousin named Conrad, and my grandfather, who came from Italy at 12 years old and couldn't speak or write English. His parents sent him here. They were farmers, neighbors, to the United States to have a better life. And his uncle, Frank, his brother, was supposed to meet him. And Frank didn't show up at Ellis Island. So my grandfather came into Ellis Island, didn't know anybody, couldn't speak English. That's how I got the name Tortorello. Our real name is Torello. They added an extra T-O-R and an L and an O. It would have been a lot shorter if they'd gotten the name right. So it was Tortorello for the rest of my life. But he, at 12 years old, got a job laying tar in the city streets. They were starting out to cover the cobblestones, if you remember. And his job was to just put the tar down on the roads and smooth it out, whatever. And he worked for the Department of Sanitation for 30 years. And I think the highest job he ever got was he was actually a street sweeper. I don't know if you remember those days in urban areas, but they had a big barrel on wheels they carried around. They'd sweep the streets manually and then put, you know, the garbage and whatever, the dirt, can. Well, anyway, he managed to save money. How, I don't know. But he ended up buying a 4-family apartment house in Maspeth, which is on the border of Queens and Brooklyn. And so growing up, my parents and I were in one apartment. My Aunt Anna and Uncle Harry were in another apartment, and they had a son named Conrad. And then upstairs, my grandmother and grandfather had an apartment. And believe it or not, Charlie, and I forget her name, Lux, were in the apartment across from my grandparents, and it turned out that she was the mother of Chuck Connors, if you remember the rifleman. And so he would come to see her. And of course, I was watching him on television. And I don't know if you know this, but he was actually a great baseball player. He was on the Chicago White Sox and stuff. He was a big guy and a really good hitter. But anyway, he liked Hollywood a lot, and he became famous there. But the real story was me and my cousin Conrad. Because we were in the same apartment building, we grew up together. And we were only a year apart in terms of age. And, we were like brothers. We had good times together. We fought with each other. He once really bit me hard. Yeah. Flesh of my flesh, whatever. But when he got to be about 6 or 7 years old, he kept falling off his two-wheeler bike. And they didn't know why. And then they discovered he had a brain tumor, very aggressive brain tumor. So some of the things I was describing to you about what happens to people with brain tumors in those days, I saw firsthand by watching how much not only did my mother deteriorate with it, but how he did. And he got progressively worse, and they had moved his bed into the living room. So when people came to visit, he was there. And, people would try to talk to him or hold him or hug him or kiss him or whatever they could do. And he died. And he died on Good Friday that particular year. He was in a coma. And then he physically was dead on Easter Sunday, which meant that he was resurrected. But that had a great impact on my life, because I kept saying to myself, like Eric did, why am I still here? I could have been killed by the car. Conrad died and I didn't. I had survivor's guilt, big time. Why am I fine and why is he gone? And so I made a promise to myself that no matter whatever happened to me in my life, and a lot of good things happened to me in my life. I got a scholarship to a very elite private prep school. And then I got full scholarship to college, a very good college. I always had him with me. Whenever I was scared or frightened or didn't think I could do the work and really felt out of place, like Riverdale Country School, the kids were very elite. The Kennedy kids went there, Bob and John. They were before me. Calvin Hill, the great football player for the Baltimore Colts, went to Riverdale. A couple of the famous conductors, their kids were there. Edie and Steve Gourmet's kid was there. So these were very elite children, and they were paying about $60,000 a year to go to that school then. And the reason why was because most of the graduating class would go to Ivy League colleges. So they were paying for that. They paid enormous sums of money. But these kids, many of them had nannies, many of them had chauffeur-driven limousines. And trying to adjust to that, being in the city streets of New York, to getting along with those kids was really tough. And doing the work was really hard, as you can imagine. Going from public school to a school where they expect you to go on to Yale or Harvard. But in those moments of crisis, in those moments of loneliness, I would pray to Conrad and say, you got to help me, babe. This is tough stuff, right? You better help me on this test. And that went through my whole life, even through college. So I always felt he was with me. But the reason I did it was I wanted him to live through me, because he never had the chance. I had the chance and he didn't. And I felt that responsibility to take him with me, literally, wherever I went. And when I was confirmed, in the Catholic Church, you take the name of a saint as your confirmation name. Believe it or not, there is a Saint Conrad with a C. And so My real name, total name is Nicholas John Conrad Tortorella. And it was a great comfort for me through all those years. And the really interesting thing was God has a way of talking to you. You just got to be open to it and listen to it. When I got married and I had children, I was living in Rockland County in West Nyack. And we had a house on about a 1/3 acre. And behind our house, there was a state highway called Route 59. And there were always car accidents out there, or boyfriends or husbands kicking their wives out of the car because they had a fight. There were all kinds of traffic accidents, as you can imagine. And so we were kind of used to people ringing our back door bell in the middle of the night because the car broke down or they'd been in an accident or for some reason they needed to use our telephone. So one summer night, we have the windows open and I wake up at about 3:30 in the morning and I keep hearing this young child say, "Help me, help me." And I'm like, what is going on? There's probably some kid out there lost or something. So I go outside and I go around the back of the house where the road was. And there on a tree stump is the infant of Prague. I see him in a vision. And I brought, in case since you're Presbyterian, you may not have seen what the infant of Prague looks like. So it's like show and tell. This is what the infant of Prague looks like. He's a child, but he's in a gown. Cast it around. And he's standing on a tree stump, saying, "Help me, help me." And I immediately fall to my knees and I'm looking, I guess like the kids did at Fatima, like, what the heck is going on here? And I'm trying to ask him questions like, what do you mean help me? What do you want me to do? And he didn't answer. He just says, "Help me." And then he disappeared. So I go back in the house, go back to sleep. And then the next morning I wake up and, the question becomes, is this real or is this a dream? And I really struggled with that question for many years about whether, it actually happened or it was just a dream or whatever. But now I'm going to show you almost like what the proof was to me that it wasn't a dream. What I surmised when I kept thinking about what does help me mean, and given his age, that he wanted me to maybe help at an orphanage. So I looked for orphanages with kids that I could work at. And in Rockland County, there was no orphanage. However, there was Letchworth Village, which was a place for severely retarded people. And my wife and I went to Letchworth Village and we asked if we could help in any way. And they said, "Oh yeah, we have a Wednesday night where we bring people in to be with severely handicapped here. And you play games with them, you sing with them, you do anything that'll bring them some joy and comfort. And you come for a couple of hours on Wednesday nights and do this." And so my wife and I did it for several years. And I can tell you, we got more out of it than we gave to them. Somebody wrote a book about severely retarded people, children, and they called it The Clowns of God. And it kind of fits because they're very loving, many of them. They're very sincere. They're totally honest. They may be handicapped in some ways, but in some ways they're a lot better than we are. There's very little deviousness. There's very little fakeness. They're totally genuine. And we got, really close to them to the point where we come in on a Wednesday night and they call out our name, they come over and hug and kiss us. And so it was a very rewarding experience to have done that. But it showed me how important we are to each other, how important relationships are, how important it is that we try to help others when we can. And it really made an impact on my life. And as I was growing up, getting older and growing up and having my own 2 children, I had 2 girls, I taught CCD for kindergarten through high school at the Catholic Church. When I joined Westminster, as you guys mostly know, I was a deacon here, and I was a Stephen minister here, and I've helped lead the Wednesday night gathering a men group. You know, one year I ran this group. So I've always tried to put things into my life where I've been helping other people. And that's how I interpreted what help me meant when Jesus spoke to me. Help me meant help the others. I've given you an impression of who I am. It's your job to give it to them. And that's what I always try to think of. How can you give an impression of who Jesus is to others so that they can feel his presence? And so it had an amazing impact on my life. I had a very good life. Guys here know, because they've heard me talk about all the surveys I've done over the years, the political candidates I worked for, the corporations I worked for, famous people I worked for doing surveys. So it's been a great life. And yet, you know, along the way, I had prostate cancer and spinal surgery and had a heart attack, but I'm still here and I'm still trying to spread the word of God because I really believe it's a miracle. And here's what the proof is. Only 10 years ago, I was moving and I found a cigar box of mine, and I knew I had some mementos in there. Had like my ID from when I was in the Army and a whole bunch of other things that meant a lot. And there I found my cousin Conrad's prayer card. And there's a picture of me and his picture's on there. And we almost look like we could be brothers, seriously. And
Hold the microphone.
yeah, here, let me pass these around. I need to get them back because they're
Yes.
my only 2. But the one thing I wanted you to see is what was on the side front of the mass card, the infinite cross. Now, you know, one could say somewhere deep in my subconscious, I had recorded the infinite Prague from that card, but I certainly didn't remember it until I found it in that cigar box. But that to me was like final confirmation that it was more than a dream, it was a calling. And so I've tried to live that calling. So that's that story.
That's great. Very great. Thank you. There is something too that is not seen in all of these stories. Mark, you had something you wanted to relate?
Well, I'm afraid this doesn't hold a candle to the stories you've just heard. It's a very lighthearted story. And as we've gone through life, every once in a while we get a tap on the shoulder that we are not alone, and we don't go through life alone, that we do have people that have passed on. Like last week, Anne was talking about spirit guides, and I like to think that our ancestors and people who have gone before us are watching us. They may not be saints. I don't know what the definition of a saint really is, but we're really not going through life alone. Well, one fall, when we were still living in Oklahoma, my wife said, it's time to make Aunt Ruth's chocolate plum pudding. She makes it once a year. She's got it in Aunt Ruth's handwriting on a 3x5 card. And at the time, we kept our recipes in the bookcase right about here. And she looked through all 4 boxes and could not find the recipe. She looked and looked and looked. And so I thought, well, another set of eyes. So I went through all 4 boxes, could not find it. Says, well, I've got to make it and I got to use the recipe. So I'll call my brother Greg, who lives in Wiscasset, Maine. So she called him and she said, have you got Aunt Ruth's recipe for chocolate plum pudding? He says, sure, I'll send it to you in an email. Well, at this time, our printer was over here and our printer paper was over here in a box with a lid on it. So after a little while, she checked the computer and sure enough, the email came through. He says, well, I want to print this off, but the printer was out of paper. So she goes over here to the printer box, to the paper box, and opens it up. And the recipe was sitting on top of the paper. And I said to her, well, I guess Aunt Ruth wanted to give it to you personally. And she says, don't you start. Anyway, that's a very lighthearted story, but it's one of those little reminders that we do not go through life alone.
Thank you, Mark. That's
Bill?
You can pass this around. I'm not a speaker, okay, so bear with me. My mother, before I was born, had 2 twins that passed away at birth. So anyway, we go through Catholic school. I go to Catholic school and I'm not baptized. So when I was in 2nd grade, they got 2 8th graders to stand for me, okay? I had no idea what was happening. I was born hard of hearing. I couldn't hear. So anyway, when I was about 12 years old, 13 years old, I asked my mother, why did I have that? Why didn't I get baptized when everybody else did? And she said, because when you fell down the basement stairs, I baptized you there. And I told her, I saw that. And she said, what do you mean you saw it? I said, I saw that. Until this day, I still see it. That's 80 years ago. Well, anyway, I didn't know what was happening. Went to high school, was really bad student. And on the senior year, my brother-in-law, who was in the Second World War, was on the battleship Saratoga. No, it wasn't Saratoga, it was another one. But anyway, the principal of the school was on the boat with him. So that kind of helped me get through high school. You know what I mean? Then got married. And when I was in 12th grade, when I was in 5th grade at grade school, we used to be able to go to the Y. And we'd go in there, go swimming, and then after that, we'd go to like a little dance. Well, we're all swimming. How many people? I don't know for sure. But the time came for us to leave. So everybody leaves. I run out, and I forgot my towel. So I run back in the pool, and there's a girl in the middle of the pool drowned. So I jumped in, didn't have any idea what to do, just did it. I jumped in and grabbed around the neck, got over to the side, then finally other people came in. That was the first miracle for me. I've done CPR, never learned how to do it, from 5 people so far. One was a 8-month-old baby girl who me and my wife were home, and this neighbor came in, knocking on the door. The baby came in and she was rigid, she was like this. And I just said, Jesus, help me. So the CPR on her. What happened was all this mucus came out of her mouth. It was like somebody got whipped cream. It all came out of her nose and mouth and all onto my face. And then finally the EMTs came and they asked me, what did I do? So I said, I hope I didn't do anything to harm her. She said, no, you saved her life. So that was another little miracle in my life. And then there was a woman in the Acme Market who was 84, 85 years old, and I was in the aisle next to her, and I heard thump on the ground. So anyway, I run around and she was out on the ground. So I gave her CPR, and she lived for these 2 days, able to see her family before she did pass away. So these are things that happened in my life, and I figured, why me? You know, poor student, high school, everything. I met my lovely wife there on a ski trip when I wasn't even going to go. And the other thing was, I was out of a job, and I was looking around, so I went to Acme Market, and I filled an application out. They said to come in tomorrow. Well, anyway, I called my brother, or my brother happened to call me. He said, Joe, did you find a job yet? I said, oh, no, I got an application in Acme, and I got to go tomorrow. Oh, I know the president of Acme. So he called up Joe Gould, who was the president at the time. And next thing I know, they told me to start Saturday at a store in the Glen Oak. So these, I could go on and on and on about these little things that happened to me. So it took me a while to understand why me. And it's because things that went through my life, even up to about 5 years ago, I still didn't understand what was going on. But now I know why, because I saved a couple of people's lives, and I'm always helping people, just in my thing. So that's about it. But believe me, there is a God, and there is an afterlife.
Thank you. This is great. Do we have any others that would like to speak? Yes, Bob.
I've been thinking about this all week, or whether I was gonna say anything or not, but, except for the Cleavers, most of you don't know that Kathy's not my first wife. My first wife, we were married 30 years when she passed from breast cancer. But very early in our marriage, probably in the first 2 or 3 years, she developed a problem with her kidney. And she had suffered quite a bit from pain. She always said it was in her back. So we ended up, she needed to have surgery. So I can remember sitting in the surgery waiting area at Riddle Hospital. And I just bowed down and I said, Lord, just be there. And at that moment, I see it is in my mind's eye because I could see this picture in my head of her side, surgeon's hands with a scalpel, and then another pair of hands came over top of the surgeon. And I knew she'd be all right. So we lived for 30 years together, and she never had any more problems with the kidney. So that's my story.
Well, I'm gonna make the last kind of story that has occurred just this year. I do a lot of reading. I read, Lorna Byrne is a great author. She has written about angels in my hair. And so she can see angels. She's an adult. She couldn't read or write, but the Lord asked her to write a book. And she did. So I'm bored. I'm a grandpa. I got the grandkids over to my house, and 3 of them were there, and then 2 went upstairs. And I'm sitting there with the other one in the basement. And I say to her, I say, how is your guardian angel? And she's about 7. She says, why is it never in front of me? That was a curveball. I thought she would want me to tell her about guardian. She says, why is it never in front of me? later on, I was sitting on the sofa in the family room, and Lucas, our youngest grandchild, was with him. And I said, "Can you see Lucas's guardian angel?" She said, "Yes, it's very small." And I said, "What about my guardian angel?" She said, "You're sitting on him." And finally, the third time when my wife was in the room, I said, "Any questions about guardian angels? Why do they never touch the ground?" And these are all true of what Lorna Byrne tells you she sees of guardian angels. And we all have guardian angels. I haven't been blessed to be able to see guardian angels. I don't even know the name of my guardian angel, but it just goes to show you this world is very, very different. Oh, and the final thing, we came for the pancake and sausage supper. So a couple days after that, I said, "Were there any guardian angels at the pancake supper?" She said, "Too many to count."
Too many to count.
So talk to your grandkids. And she had never been to church that often because they live way up in Downingtown, but they like to come to Westminster. So keep your eyes open, keep your ears open, keep your minds open, because the Lord is right here. He's with all of us. So I'll let Ted close. We're already over. Next Sunday is the organ concert. So
Tuesday,
what did I say?
next Sunday.
Yeah, next week is the organ concert on Tuesday. So
Okay, you got that on Tuesday, 9:30 in here for coffee, fellowship, chatting, and then about 5 we'll venture over to the sanctuary and enjoy Wayne's presentation. Yeah, Dave.
there are vegetables here. Somebody went to the vegetable market and made a haul. I can tell you there's a few of these. These are both mushrooms. So if you like mushrooms, come up, help yourself. Ian has got bags for you.
Oh, thank you. There's a soup to be made. So again, thanks for being here. And the message I get, at least for myself, from all the discussions is be attentive to what's going on and try not to be so busy, but listen for that tweak, the word of God, what he's trying to tell us, rather than getting totally engrossed in the worldly activities that are going on around us. Important as they may be, calming yourself down and listening for the word is more important. Thank you. Have a good week.